And we're live.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike.
And I'm John. Welcome to Men Without a Nation.
You can come and find us at menwithoutanation.blogspot.com, Men Without a Nation on Podbean, at Nation Men on Twitter, and of course, Men Without a Nation here on YouTube. For those who haven't seen the blog, the title of the last blog is the title of this stream. It's about civilizational disintegration, the topic being the empowerment of women. So yeah, let's any opening thoughts, John?
I did the interesting idea about the empowering of women is kind of how they are attacking American men. So
Yeah, for sure. It's well, the oldest recorded, I guess you would say, incident of the subversion of the feminine, as well as probably the first feminist act, was in the Garden of Eden, when Satan tempted Eve to eat the fruit. So,
well, I think that throughout history, we've seen through women in leadership roles and women kind of when they sort of take point, if you will, that they can be deceived, and I think that was the first example of that kind of deception.
yeah, really for sure. So just backing up a little bit, we got to remember that I think it's helpful to start at the beginning when trying to figure out how things go wrong. And so we all have to remember that when God made everything, he set things up in a specific sort of way. He made the world, and then he made Adam. He made the man first. And then after he made the man, he made the first woman from the man. And so, and it wasn't that this, even though Christians kind of get this weird idea that because we're all people, we're all somehow equal in every aspect, and it's simply not the case, and that's evident from creation. The Bible is very clear that in terms of the salvation that people have as a gift of the sacrifice of Jesus, everybody's equal. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, or if you're a slave or a freeman or a Jew or a Greek, or a Gentile, more accurately. It's for all that the God chooses to grace with that salvation, it's equally doled out to everyone. And so in that respect, we're equal, but in pretty much every other respect, we're not. And men and women being no exception to that. And so,
sometimes
God,
it's not even just about like an inequality, but just a difference. The differences between men and women are vast, and the differences biologically, the way that their brains work, the way that they think, the way that they perceive, the way the world works around them is very different. And I think that it's important to note that we used to put women, men used to set women more up on a pedestal. You would open a door for a woman. You would let her into the car. You would do these things because that was the polite and correct thing to do, was to treat them well.
mm-hmm.
And in 2019, in current year, if you will, for the mania trope, in current year, it's almost like that's been twisted to where if a man opens a door for a woman, you're considered a sexist pig, or that you might get your head bitten off just for doing what your grandparents taught you was polite.
Right. Well, our I'd say their grandparents had a lot more sense than we do today.
I know mine
Uh,
did.
yeah, mine did too. And the more that I experience life, the more I realize the wisdom of the past in a lot of the traditions that we've tried to leave behind.
It take
Um,
it takes a lot of work now in order to try and get rid of the ideas that have been pushed in our heads, if you will, through things like public education, media, stuff like that. That not to open that door. You know what I mean, for a woman that's coming in. So in order to you have to actually think about what you're doing. You know what? I want to do this. I want to be polite to this person, to this woman. I want to, it's almost a moral or ethical code,
yeah.
but you have to work for it.
Uh, yeah, honestly, a little bit. Yeah, in today's, yeah, well, I think that the phrase sort of the phrase the upside down, I think is a good one to kind of explain the world that we live in with regards to the how the relationship between men and women has evolved or devolved more accurately, and how sort of the ripple effects of that throughout kind of throughout our culture as well as the world. Um, going back to sort of the Garden of Eden, just briefly, um, uh, God didn't make males to be independent creatures. He, there's God doesn't do anything by mistake, and so by creating Adam, and then if you read the account, he has him do all this work, and at the end of it, he's like, "Man, I'm kind of lonely here," and then God trots out, the perfect partner. One of the translations that I like is that it's like, God, he brings forth all the creatures and not a suitable partners to be found. But then when God presents Eve to Adam, he says, "This one, this time." It's kind of, I like that's a translation that can be had from from that account, and it's like he's like saying, "Finally, at last, this is the one." Um, and so, in a lot of ways, women are women were the last thing that was created, and so in a very real sense, they're the crown jewel
I love the way you
of
put that.
of the creation. But in another very real sense, they're not to be treated as the crown jewel, so to speak, because they're well, no, I take that back. I'm going to retract that. Their role is to be helper, but it doesn't mean that they're treasured any less than a crown jewel.
I like
Or,
that.
or
Yep, that's a
yeah.
good way to put it. I think
And
that
so,
what you're trying to say, or maybe just to kind of add a little bit, or mm,
sure, go for it.
not infer. Um, so you say that their role is to be helper. That doesn't mean that they're like it's not. They should find joy in helping.
Hmm.
There's been kind of an unfortunate malignment to the hierarchy of the home and the nuclear family,
Hmm.
and you see it in well everywhere you look. The the idea that they push is that men are these stupid lummoxes that are good for nothing but going to work and then sitting on the couch and staring at football.
Hmm.
And so they've made it to where if the woman is helping that man, that form of man, the man that you see on television, well then what worth is she, right? So
Right,
she's bringing the little woman bringing the man a beer trope, right? And so
right.
they take that and they make it ugly, but it's not ugly. It doesn't have to be.
Well, I mean, and that kind of scenario that you just kind of laid out, it's like that's the caricature.
Mm-hmm.
That's not real.
Right.
You know, it's that's not what it's supposed to be like at all. And in fact, if you go, go read the blog post. But let's see here. It's from the book of Ephesians, chapter 5. Gotta inject some scripture in here somewhere.
Absolutely.
Ephesians 5, verse 21 through 33. It says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your own husbands, as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband." And so,
that's one of my favorite passages in the Bible.
It's really awesome. It's really awesome because for those who are listening that are maybe less Bible literate, that there is basically telling us that the relationship between men and women, it's set up the way that it is to be a living reminder of the gospel and a living reflection of the gospel. And so if it gets out disjointed or it gets inverted or turned on its head, then it doesn't represent the gospel anymore, which is why in a very real sense things start to go wrong. Because in a very real sense, when the relationship is thrown out of alignment, you're no longer living according to the gospel.
Which is one of the reasons. I mean, you can look at some things like modern divorce statistics. So the further that the relationship between men and women, and the further that the relationship in the home between a man and wife have been perverted, the higher that number goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, forget about divorce statistics. Look at, the illegitimacy rate among children.
Yeah.
I mean, forget about, because the divorce statistics are really skewed. They're really silly, and it's just like every other statistic. It's just it's a damn lie,
Oh, yeah.
there are lies, damn lies in statistics. So, but I think the illegitimacy rate is probably the best indication as to the dysfunction of that God-given relationship. So yeah.
Well,
I think that
that's a great point. That's an awful number. Babies out of wedlock and babies having babies.
Mm-hmm. Which actually is that plays into. I mean that kind of plays into some of these articles that we're going to share. And I think that we're going to share those in the second segment. We only got about 6 minutes left in this one, so I think we'll just keep talking through.
Sure.
Talking through this a little bit. In the next segment, we can share a few articles and stuff like that. But one thing that I kind of wanted to point out, so in the very way that women were created, sort of as the crown jewel of creation, but also as as the position being made to be a helper, that reality has manifested itself in the way that women have been traditionally treated. The opening of the doors, the always respect women, and really just the overall protection of women. as I wrote in the blog earlier today, it's like, and it's in the description. Um, Women hold the biological and cultural keys to civilization. They always have and always will. Women are the women are the vanguards of culture, and they literally make children.
Right. The
So
life springs
they
forth.
they are they are responsible for the future. They're responsible for civilization continuing and culture continuing and being strong. They can't do it by themselves, obviously, because that needs to be protected by strong men. But as women have been, and I believe that they've been, it's no real coincidence to me that the very first human sin in the Bible, it was it was the woman who sinned because she was deceived by Satan, because he was promising her something more than what she had. He was telling her that she could be more, or that she should be more, and so it planted that seed of malcontent.
Isn't that
It
interesting?
planted a seed of rebelliousness,
Right.
um, and that is that's the way that's the spot where women are weak, is the insecurity with their station, I think. And carrying on that way, the devil didn't come at Adam, he came at Eve because he knew that through Eve he could get to Adam.
Right. What easier way is there to get to a married man than through his wife?
Exactly.
That's a story as old as marriage itself. There it is, right there. The very first sin in the Bible.
Yeah. And if you notice, it's the great thing about the thing that we see in the Bible as well, though, is that God didn't blame Eve. He
No,
blamed Adam.
he's
And
the head
so,
of the household, the
exactly.
protector, and uh, if he had been more aware of what was going on.
Oh, I don't think that it was a lack of awareness. He was right there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It was because his weakness was his wife, which goes to show that if the first man ever made the most perfect man next to Jesus Christ, if he could be, if his wife was his weakness, we don't, us fellows today don't have much of a chance
That's funny. That reminds me of a
of
John
overcoming that.
Wayne quote.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a movie where John Wayne says, "Well, someone asked John Wayne, well, what happened to him?" And John Wayne says, "Well, what always happens to a man, a woman."
But I think that part of yeah, I think that we'll get into this next segment. We'll do a quick rehash of history, and then we'll kind of bring it up to we've kind of danced around the edges of it, but let's put a finer point on it in this next segment.
Sure.
And I think that we'll just start with a little bit of history, and then we will kind of touch on modern feminism a little bit, share some articles, and then after that, we'll get into what the Bible has to say, and see what solutions are available.
Excellent.
All
So
right.
I'm going to drop us out for the segment, and we will take a short break.
All right. Sounds good. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Excellent. And we're back.
Hey, all right. So, we have organized ourselves over the break, and we got some more good stuff here for you guys. So, I think that what we need to do is we kind of need to do a shotgun history of this of kind of just how women have been messed with over the years, and sort of the forces at work on our women, and bring it around to modern day. We don't need to spend too much time on modern day because everyone's familiar with the social cancer that is feminism.
Third wave, currently, apparently.
Fourth wave.
Really?
Potentially. I don't know. Third wave, fourth wave.
It's all the same. Just the names
Nth
change.
wave. Zer wave. Okay. All right, that one fell flat. That's okay.
No, it's good.
So, if you listen to our last stream, we kind of talked a little bit about we were talking about the American religion and kind of the roots of things. One of the things that we touched on was a religious movement called spiritualism, and it had to do with communicating with spirits and stuff like that. And one of the influences in spiritualism was a thing called Fourierism, which was a precursor for socialism. It's like the early socialist thought, and so in a very and we I don't know if we discussed this or not too much, but the folks involved with spiritualism, they were, this was like the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, and so they were very big on egalitarianism and pushing for women's suffrage. And so in a very real sense, the modern feminist movement of the last 100 years has very real roots in witchcraft and socialism.
Well, both of those things, both witchcraft and socialism, have something in common, which is pervasive women leadership. So you have a lot of, even now you can see it in, I know we're kind of trying to stay toward the history, but even in current socialist organizations of the Black Bloc style movements, you see a lot of women in leadership roles, and witchcraft is basically the religion of worshiping kind of almost, I wouldn't say toxic femininity.
Well, it's, honestly, in witchcraft in its most benign form is the idea of feminine empowerment, but also sort of the women as sort of a subversive, like a countercultural subversive force, a little bit sort of like the idea of the power behind the power,
right,
so to speak. And so it's very subversive. Anyways, so from there, from spiritualism, then you kind of get the suffrage movement of the late 19th, early 20th century, which not a lot of people know this, but most of the women in America didn't actually want the vote. It was pushed by a small cadre of elitist women who, and then they had marketing. Later on in the early feminist movement, they even had marketing companies, organizing their marches and stuff like that to make them more effective. And so it was like total propaganda.
It was like an advertising campaign.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. But it's just total propaganda. It wasn't legitimately a grassroots thing at all. It's not like women were downtrodden and oppressed and begging for the vote. It was like a small group of women decided to try to change the world, and they succeeded.
Well, look at how much it changed America, much in the same way that people are trying to force more immigration. I don't want to just jump into a fire, but
Okay.
because of the voting block that it creates, that's what that was a huge voting block.
Hmm. Well, I mean, essentially, it doubles the voting population, and so then, which actually, if anybody who's listening knows anything about economics, that's the surest way to make something less valuable, is to, increase its quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And so the vote lost half of its value overnight, as soon as women were given that chance to vote. And even worse than that, there's studies, just sort of, survey studies and stuff like that. Women vote differently depending on if they're married or not, or if they have children or not, or, I would even assume that it has to do with the time of the month.
That's why Rachel Maddow was so angry at women in America during the last election.
Mm.
The percentage of women that actually voted for Donald Trump because they wanted to feel protected, and they were
Mm-hmm.
tired of being left kind of hanging out there by themselves. The amount of women that actually voted that way made that elitist cadre we talked about, the modern one, just very pissed.
Yeah. Well, it did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a lot of married women with children who voted for Trump.
Yep.
Because their security relies upon their husbands being able to work.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I don't want to get too far down that one. So
Right.
so after suffrage, right after suffrage, I mean, this is around the time of the World Wars, and especially World War II was the one that really shook things up demographically, because a lot of men went to war, and then women had to step up to the plate at home in order to really kind of fill that demand for manufacturing.
Rosie the Riveter.
Exactly.
Right.
Who was another piece of propaganda, by the way? That the woman that apparently the woman who posed for those pictures, she was an accomplished orchestra cellist or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so Rosie the Riveter was propaganda as well. But that's okay. We don't need to dwell on those things too much.
Right.
But one of the interesting things that happened as a result of all those women, when less men came home,
Right.
the women that had husbands, they had a bunch of babies, hence the baby boom, right?
Right.
But the ones that didn't have husbands, they had to work, because either, their fathers were getting old, or they had fought in World War I, or maybe they died in World War I, and then they didn't have husbands, or their husband died in World War II, or men that they thought of marrying had died in World War II. And so then women are suddenly put in a position where they have to fend for themselves. And so, again, just like I just mentioned with, when women got the vote, just in an economic sense, it devalued the vote. When a lot of women went to work out of necessity in the 50s and the 60s, and again into the 70s, the value of labor was diminished because suddenly there was a doubling of the workforce.
Yeah.
And then in the 60s there was further that was when you started to get lots of Hollywood propaganda coming out and stuff like that. Cultural manipulation.
Burn your bras.
Essentially, yeah.
Right.
And so it was that was like second wave feminism right there.
Yep.
That was starting to kick off, which, it was again, it was a rebellious thing. It was, you're not going to be the, Susie Homemaker. You have worth, damn it, and you can go out and get a job and make your own career.
Right.
You don't need a man.
The trope of the career woman. Every
Mm-hmm.
80s movie with shoulder pads ever.
Basically, yeah. I think a good movie that kind of shows this tension is the movie Mona Lisa Smiles or something like that. I think it's Julia Roberts.
Yeah, it
It
is a
was a
Julia Roberts
really,
film.
it was a really good movie. But it kind of shows, I mean, it's Hollywood propaganda, but, I think it kind of shows the tension of the times a little bit,
Absolutely.
to a good degree. Of course, it puts the leftist spin on it,
Of
but
course.
it's,
Who
I
won out
think,
in the end of it, really?
or, yeah, essentially. Yeah, and for those, yeah, just watch the movie. It's pretty good. Um, so then, so,
I think, just for 1 second,
yeah, go ahead.
another thing that happened when that workforce doubled. So we had the voting block double, and then we
Hmm.
had the workforce double out of a sort of necessity after we were forced into a war there.
Hmm.
The other thing that happened was the amount of taxpayers doubled.
Right,
So
right,
there's another economic reasons for all of that propaganda as well.
right, right. Yeah, no, that's definitely for sure. And you know, I think that's enough. That's really enough. I mean, we could get into so the other big thing there, the other good big historical things that kind of went in there were we kind of talked about the '60s, the sexual revolution, um,
Yeah.
but also the invention of hormonal birth control in the '50s, I believe, as well as the Roe v. Wade decision. All
Plymouth
of
Rock.
these. Mhm. All of these things kind of snowballed and very thoroughly flipped that original God-given relationship on its head,
Mm-hmm.
where the people that were supposed to be the sort of again, like the guardians of culture and the incubators of life became inferior men, so to speak, in the workforce.
Right.
Well, and you can laugh at that, and it's really funny, but it's like you think about what's all of the political pushes for. It's about making the workplace more sensitive. It's about making the workplace more feminine.
Well, I'm of the
To
opinion that
let
men and women shouldn't work in the same place.
I don't think that women should work at all unless they have to.
No, yeah, you got a good point there.
I mean,
Well,
it.
so many. I mean, how many lawsuits have come out of the workplace?
Mhm.
You know?
Well, and it's a fundamental conflict between men and women. See, we all think that going to a cubicle is normal because that's what we kind of grew up with. But we got to remember that there was a time when not only did mom stay home, but dad stayed home as well, and they were industrious together at
Ah,
home. And so it's like in a very real sense, the family has been, from it didn't start with feminism, but that was sort of the thing that kicked it into overdrive, right? I mean, it started with the Industrial Revolution to a large degree, where men were taken out of the home,
right.
where people had to move to cities to make a living, and that was kind of the start of the the degradation of a person into an interchangeable unit of labor, essentially.
Isn't that? I mean, that's what
That's
we're
that's
feeling the
global.
pinch of now.
Well, exactly. Maybe that's globalism. That's free. That's international free trade. That's even intranational free trade.
It's a very Marxist
That's
idea.
the result of it. And so it's very natural that, I mean, basically now, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you are an interchangeable economic unit if you participate in that system. And so
Everyone's
I
equal and everyone is equally nothing.
essentially, yeah, people have, but especially women have given up their, I mean, I don't know, I'm a man. And so obviously I'm a man. And so I have no idea what it's like to be a woman. But you know what? It honestly seems to me, even the more that I look at it, it's not degrading at all to be like, okay, to be told, look, you don't have to go out and have anyone else but your husband be your boss. Your husband, basically, you look at this, your husband is your boss. He's the best boss you're ever going to have because he loves you to death.
I mean, who works harder to make your life better?
That's right. You get to create life, and you get to, and we're trusting our culture to you, your ability to transmit the culture to your children. I mean, that's like the most important job that there is.
Absolutely.
To be honest. And so it's like, yeah, it seems like, maybe if you don't think about it too much, it's like, God made women to be helpers. How degrading. It's like, no, you don't understand. God gave them a position of the highest honor. And it's to be treated like that. It's to be protected. But it's for the purpose, primary role is helping your husband so that you can because he's doing everything for you.
Right.
So it's, yeah. So I think that, well, kind of rambled on a little bit here.
No, I think that was all important.
Yeah. But so a couple of articles, and, John can pull these up and you can get the, you just kind of, I'll just talk about them a little bit and you can put each one up and for 30 seconds so people can scroll through and get the URLs. Perfect. There's one from desiringgod.org, and I think it's a very, very I only read about half the article. It's a little bit lengthy. It's not too bad though, but I thought it was very well written, and I think it kind of explained a lot of the pitfalls of feminism and how of the modern state of masculinity, and how men need to step up basically, and they need to just be men. Another article that was kind of the counterpoint to it is from sojo.net, that's Sojourners, and basically the guy who wrote it, he's an SJW feminist egalitarian cuck. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. The dude, I mean, the title is what's the title of the
problem is sinful masculinity, not effeminacy.
And it's like the first paragraph, he basically talks about how, men being effeminate and stuff like that. That's just combating toxic masculinity. It's just like, oh, okay, and you lost me.
That's how we wound up with awful Instagram posts.
Right. So I think that those two, if folks listening read those two articles, I think it's a pretty good showing of kind of both of sort of the conflict at play. And I think it's important to realize that. But some of the other stuff that's just kind of going on, that's just kind of, it's the end result of the family falling apart, basically, and feminism and intersectionality and just these subversive ideas of that, gender is, the femininity and masculinity are interchangeable, and there's no such thing as gender, and we need to raise our children accordingly. Pull up the Daily Caller article. Okay. This is a really, really disturbing article from the Daily Caller about how there's actually a market for genital prostheses for children who are quote-unquote transitioning.
This is degenerate.
It's complete degeneracy. These kids are going to grow up so messed up. And I feel
if they grow up at all, there's a 50%. There's a number of
50%. There's that, but I mean, this is just complete and utter degeneracy. And these, I'm not a violent person, but man,
yeah,
it makes my blood boil that these children are being put through this.
Well, just 10 years ago, people would have been in jail.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is a UK article, or it's from the UK, but I mean, it's about midway down. The Parents of Transgender Children has more than 8,000 members. It's a Facebook group, I believe. And it's like, oh my God. I mean, I guess it's a nationwide thing, but it's like, or a worldwide thing, not nationwide, but like worldwide. But it's like, man, this is just.
Well, you You know my views about the time period.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as some people, there's a phrase, don't immanentize the eschaton,
Right.
but it's like, come Lord Jesus, that's all I have to say. It's like I can't, I don't know, man. So, that's
It makes my throat tighten up. It's hard to talk about.
it is. And I mean this is just, just the raising of children. This isn't even like touching on the abortion issue, which is like I had a visceral reaction a few years ago when I found out that essentially there's less people with Down syndrome being born because they're being aborted.
Iceland. There was a huge article about that in Iceland.
Well, not even that. Well, I know in Iceland, but here in the U.S., I mean, there's testing you can get done for that, and people do, and it's just like,
if your children have any kind of problems and that they can find them in utero, and I mean any kind of abnormality, whether physical or genital, or I mean physical or genetic, I should say. My bad.
Oh, good, man.
That article had me throwing the genital thing.
Yeah, I understand.
Whether it's physical or genetic, the doctors will push you into abortion. It's a decision that they want you to make. They want you to make the decision quickly because time is limited law-wise, or it was, a few years ago. Those laws are being subverted now.
Well, and they're being pushed back against too. I mean, there's many states that have recently passed things about, just making, provisions where if Roe v. Wade is overturned, abortion's going to be illegal in their state, which, kudos.
Well, the quote unquote men of science of the world, the doctors, people that you trust to take care of you and your family, to do things that you can't do yourself, they push that medical reason for abortion if there's anything wrong, and that's awful. Whether or not you know the outcome or not,
Yeah, that's true. So let's see here. What other articles were there? Transgender kids and the other one. There's another one from the UK from the Guardian. It's just a maddening article about a feminist who's trying to how to raise good feminist boys. And it's just basically. You can read that one. It's from the Guardian. The other one, just touching on the abortion issue, which I mean, recently with the New York decision in New York State, it's just full on Moloch worship at this point. And there's an article from Jezebel, which is a feminist, website, which is interesting because interesting that they chose a name for that because at least in charismatic circles, there's the phrase Jezebel spirit,
yep.
which is fitting actually. Maybe they did it to be ironic. I don't know, but I don't know if they did or not. Anyways,
it sounds like something that they would do.
Well, probably, but it's just about the shout your abortion movement, which is just encouraging women to be proud of the fact that they killed their babies. And so the whole point of this is, look, it started off with the vote, and now it's gotten to the point of women being empowered over killing their babies, and completely subverting culture so that they can compete with a bunch of cucked men. It's completely untenable long term, and it's tearing us all apart.
It's the fall of civilization. It's the fall of man.
Essentially. So we went a little long in this segment. We can. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to take a little break and then we can come back?
We can
back
keep
for the
going
final.
if you like, or we could take a minute.
Right. I think that just a couple more thoughts, and then I think that we can wrap up this segment.
Sure.
So, I know I didn't realize how a lot of feminism, the effects of feminism have affected my life and have affected the lives of the women in my life. Um, I'm married. I have a mother-in-law. I had a mother. May she rest in peace. I've had women friends. I've, you know, uh, I have a sister. I have nieces. I have a daughter. Um, all of these things. It's feminism has affected each and every single one of us, and it's so subversive and tricky, and just almost subliminal. But just the way that I grew up, and I grew up in a Christian home, but even like the way that I grew up, my mom, bless her heart, she stayed at home for the most part, but she fought to have her job. She, and even I would say that probably in the years that I needed her the most, she was, you know, she was working. Um, so I was kind of let down in that regard. And then when I got old enough to get into the dating ring, it was really confusing because it was just like I was never taught about, I was never, sort of taught about how men and women are supposed to get along. I just kind of had to figure it out. And, it took me the better part of a decade to kind of, to sort of figure out what the appropriate God-pleasing way to, pursue romance and marriage and stuff like that. Um, for a long time, I was what would now be considered MGTOW, um, except for I was MGTOW with a splash of pickup artist, and so it was I'd brush up on my pickup artist stuff, and then get a few dates, and then go 6 months without talking to any women because I felt like a complete jerk, and I didn't want to deal with the craziness anymore.
Right.
Some sort of combination of self-loathing and it really just led to self-loathing and hatred of the games that women were playing, and the obvious hypocrisy and double standards and all of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know do you have anything to add to that from your life?
Wow. Well, when you say that feminism has touched everything and everybody, and that it's subversive, I completely agree. And kind of in an unfortunate way, I didn't get to see that same kind of subversion because my parents were divorced, and coming from a single mother household, especially during the time period, I didn't really see relationships between men and women, and kind of did things a different way, more fell into everything, relationship wise than you did. But when I was doing that, when I was out on the quote unquote dating scene, if you could call it dating, that I was, what you wind up with is women that think that going out and pursuing men for sex is power.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't mean for sex in that they would use sex to catch men or to get them married or to gain something from it. I mean in that that whole sexual revolution that we talked about, they were out pursuing chance sexual encounters with single men, and then wanting nothing more than that. And I think that just adds to those numbers that we talked about, such as illegitimate children, all of the things, abortion rates. So that's how I've seen feminism sort of attack that family, that home, the example that we talked about earlier, that relationship between man and wife, and how that is a very Christian example.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, John. So I'm throwing you a couple of links for a couple of YouTube channels.
Yep.
Um, both of these, one of these guys is an Orthodox Christian, Jonathan Peugeot. The other one is a Catholic. He goes by the channel titled The Distributist. Jonathan Peugeot, he's an icon carver, and he talks. There's many videos that he does sort of about the symbolism of masculine and feminine and the relationship between men and women and kind of the inner work, the synergy there. And he talks a lot about symbolic inversion and stuff like this. He has many videos on the subject of men and women and masculinity and femininity and subversion, inversion, all of this stuff. Some of the stuff that these terms I've been throwing out. The other one, the distributist, he did a great 1 hour series called "The Lies of the Sexual Revolution," and I think that he very succinctly and accurately sort of lays out the pitfalls of the sexual revolution and kind of the continued subversion of especially of children. He touches on that in one of his segments, and it's just how it's all just kind of just this natural progression of things. Um, anyways, so I think unless you have anything to add, John, I think that we'll leave it there for this segment, and then we can pick it up in the last segment. We can talk. We can talk about what Scripture has to say, and share a couple things at the end to kind of lighten the mood a little bit here.
I think that's a great plan.
All right, man.
So
All right, so we're going to take a couple minutes,
Yep.
collect ourselves, hang around.
And we're back.
Hey everyone, sorry for that extended break there. When you're drinking good beer, the bladder tends to not cooperate. So I think just to kind of bring this to a nub, bring this to an end. I think that we've kind of taken a high overview on this, and it's a big subject, but I think that we've done it sufficient justice to kind of make the point is that women are weak in ways that men aren't weak, and women have been subverted and manipulated, and it's causing a lot of problems because it's turning the God-given relationship between men and women upside down. And I think that to kind of emphasize this a little bit, I mean, this is coming from the Old Testament, and I don't mean to take things out of context. There's a passage from Isaiah. It has to do. It's speaking directly to. It's speaking directly to the nation of Judah, sort of as a bit of a prophecy against them. Oh, let's see here.
Would you like for me to read?
If you could give me the verses, I forgot the verses here.
8 through 12.
8 through 12. Okay, perfect. This is just a prophecy of judgment against them. So it says, Isaiah chapter 3, verse 8 and following, for Jerusalem has stumbled and Judah has fallen, because they spoke and acted against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The expression on their faces testifies against them, and like Sodom, they flaunt their sin. They do not conceal it. Woe to them, for they have brought disaster upon themselves. Tell the righteous it will be well for them, for they will enjoy the fruit of their labor. Woe to the wicked, disaster is upon them, for they will be repaid with their hands, with what their hands have done. Youths oppress my people, and women rule over them. O my people, your guides mislead you. They turn you from your paths.
All the way far back as the Old Testament.
Yeah, there you go. And so, look, I mean, that's not talking directly about America or the West, but as Solomon wrote, there's nothing new under the sun.
Nope.
And so, I mean, you're reading this, and it's just like, they're like Sodom, they flaunt their sin. I mean, you look at what just happened in New York, and it's just like, really? You're praising yourselves for sacrificing your children. Excellent. Just the blatant sexual immorality. Why don't you bring up, it's one of the Instagram ones. It's the Lena Dunham Instagram one.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't you bring that up one? It's just really funny. I think it's by a guy named made by Jim Bob. Hi, I'm Lena Dunham. I'm the voice of a degeneration. I tried to brand being a slob without morals as female empowerment. That's her entire brand. It's so spot on. But it's just like, I mean, and another one is like Amy Schumer, I think. Yeah, it's like Amy Schumer. It's just like, I'm like, what's the other one? The woman who wrote Two Broke Girls.
Oh.
Whitney Cummings. She's another one who's just like, kind of a hoe and proud of it. It's
Sarah Silverman.
It's just, well, yeah, Sarah. No, she's one of them. So we'll just leave it at that. She doesn't really count. Anyways, but the point being, that Lena Dunham cartoon is funny, but it's like, it's so spot on. It's like degeneracy is being flaunted everywhere. It's being praised.
Well, we talked tonight about sacrificing, kind of like a sacrificing of the children, right?
Yeah.
We're not just sacrificing the babies. Because of all of this twistedness and this perversion, the older kids, like we showed with the article about the kids in school and transgender agenda, these kids that are being paraded about in drag bars, and being made to dance for grown men wearing dresses while they throw money at them.
Is that Desmond?
Desmond the whatever.
Yeah, that poor kid.
Yeah, that's,
he's gonna kill himself.
We these things are child abuse, and we're allowing our society to trumpet them as being, oh, this is equality and this is good, and everyone should raise their kids this way.
Well, it's progress. It's not even equality. It's progress.
It's disgusting,
right? Yeah. If you guys look up the like I plugged the Distributist into the previous segment. Look him up and look up the lies of the sexual revolution. That's a really, really, really good thing. It's a really, really good explanation of things from that perspective. Anyways, so let's keep on rolling here.
Yep, let's roll.
You want to read the Samuel passage, 15 verse 22 to 23?
Yes. 1 Samuel 15, 22 to 23. But Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of the rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king."
Yeah. So the reason I chose that passage is it's for the verse 23. It's the rebellion is like the sin of divination, or some translations it's the sin of witchcraft. And that brings it about. It's just like, if you read other parts of the Old Testament, God is really, really harsh about witchcraft. And even in the New Testament, there's times when, the apostles ran across like sorcerers and stuff like that, and they just they had nothing to do with them because it's just such a twisted worldview. Mm-hmm. It's just such a twisted behavior and stuff like that. Well, and evil. So it's like, well, yeah, it's complete evil. It's trying to, sorcery, witchcraft, wizardry, and all that. It's trying to do things, change the world by your own power, or by the power of something that's not. More accurately, trying to do things by a power that's not of God, mm-hmm. be it your own or some sort of a demonic entity or something like that. But it's just and so it's like Samuel puts a number. It's like the act of rebellion is in that same category, because essentially you're saying, I'm going to do it my way instead of God's way.
To kind of drag it back around to the topic of conversation, like what we're talking about, this witchcraft, this divination, trying to create with something that is not God's power. The power of creation, the power of life, is protected and carried by the women of our species, and mm-hmm. and now what we have are those women, those that creation, the power that they have in them, they're perverting it and killing the things that they're supposed to create.
Right. I mean, and you just perfectly described the sort of the inversion, like the satanic inversion that's kind of taking place, and it just directly undermines everything.
Yeah.
From the way that, just from basic things like, there is no such thing as home life anymore. There is even the education of children, even sexual relations between consenting adults. And the list goes on and on and on. I mean, we could spend hours just listing all of the things and not even talking about them. So yeah, we won't do that.
That'd be a year-long show.
Anyways, so I think that those two passages from the Old Testament, it really does kind of go to show just kind of God doesn't see it as a good thing that women are in charge, and he sees rebellion in the same vein as witchcraft, which is, so it's like as I said in the blog, egalitarianism is a lie. It's a fundamental lie. There's no such thing, and trying to pursue it is and even worse than egalitarianism, like the empowerment of women in the secular sense is just monstrously subversive. I think that probably one of the best. There's a few passages. I'm not going to read them all for the sake of time, but there's, interestingly enough, in the Bible there's more instructions for women on how to live than there are for men how to live, like direct instruction, which I found to be very interesting. And the more I've thought about it, it's more like, well, that's because 4 entire books of the New Testament have been devoted to Christ, which is the model that men are supposed to
Right.
supposed to follow. And so, if you think about it in that way, God doesn't actually have a lot of these. There's not a lot of strictures, not a lot of restrictions on women, or there's not even a lot of instruction for women. But there are some really good examples. From Proverbs 31, the wife of noble character. It's Proverbs 31 verses 10 and following. It's the last section in Proverbs. Give it a read through, and I would just say that when you do, don't just try to read it for what it is, and don't try to inject your own cultural perspective on it. Just read it for what it is, and with the original intent of the order of the relationship between men and women in mind. And so, I'll just leave it at that. The other example is the one that I read earlier, is from the book of Ephesians. What were the chapter and verse in that, John? Do you remember? So, Ephesians 5, verse 21 through something.
Let's take a look here. All right, I think I got it here. Yeah, Ephesians 5, verse 21 through 33. Yep. It just talks about just the beautiful, that men and women are both supposed to submit to each other. And the proper relationship is understanding that there is that hierarchy, that the man is the head and the woman is the helper. If you try to flip that around, or try to make it so that the man is diminished and the woman is elevated in an artificial way, it subverts that relationship. That's where all of that tension in people's homes come from these days. There's so much tension in marriage, and it's because every example that's been pushed for the past 50 years, 40 years, shows powerful women who are smart and pushing the home's agenda, and foolish men that fall down drunk and barely make it to work on Monday so they can bring home money for the woman to make decisions with.
Yeah. I mean, it's... that's the unfortunate bit. I will say this, though, and this has just been in some commentary that I've read. Interestingly enough, one of the strongest words for authority that's used in relationship to men and women is used in relationship to a woman in terms of running her household. She's called the house despot. And so it's like, God set things up to be complementarian. And if you go through and watch some of those Jonathan Peugeot videos where he talks about the symbolism of masculinity and femininity, he'll talk about how there's a very real divide in life between the public and the private. Men are for the public, women are for the private. They're both just as important as one another. Mm-hmm. But the public is the one that gets all the attention. The private's the one that's kind of been undermined. But the private's probably more important than the public. And that's the woman's sphere of influence.
Right.
So, it's not... And it's really hard to break that conditioning, or to even begin to break that conditioning in women. It's really strange. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say it's strange. I mean, we're talking about 100 years of social conditioning.
Right.
That's not broken overnight. But one of the things that I'm trying to do in my life is I'm trying to piece these things together so I can I can tell my daughters, it's like, look, don't worry about all this other stuff. Just focus on these things.
Right.
Your life's going to be happier. And the same thing for my son. I mean, I'm having a boy here any time now. The same thing for him. It's like I'm going to have to, figure out a way to raise a woman and a man in this crazy, crazy world. Let's see here.
It's a frightening proposition.
Well, you have two boys, and so it's like...
Well, the crazy thing is the things that I have to tell my sons to never say or do outside of their house, but for fear that my elementary school age sons could be made pariah for the rest of their lives over something silly.
Yeah, or worse, that you could get a visit from a social worker.
Well, that's
because of the little 20-something SJW teachers that are
directly from four-year schools and have never done anything in their life.
Yeah. So
are making judgment calls for our kids.
Basically, yeah. Now, and I want to apologize to everyone that there was another passage that I wanted to. I can't remember where it is. It was in one of Paul's letters, but he's basically talking about the different relationships that elders in the church, women elders and men elders, are supposed to have. And in do you have that 1 Timothy?
Yep. Right.
Okay. Did I give you a verse for that one?
14. I believe through
chapter 5.
Yep. Chapter 5, verse 14. Through.
Okay, and so I mean, this is the one that I remembered, so it's the advice that he gave to the elders in the other passage. I cannot remember, and I'll try to remember for next time. But it's basically like women, the role of the elder women is to teach the younger women how to love their husbands and keep their house. I mean, he just comes right out and says that. And then so for here, he's talking about, in 1 Timothy chapter 5, he's talking about, widows and stuff like that, and how to take care of widows. And so one of the things that he says in 14 is that I advise younger widows to marry, to have children, and manage their households, denying the devil occasion for slander. For some have already turned aside to follow Satan. And so, I mean, I think that the reason that there's more passages, I think, that directly speak to women, what women should do, what women shouldn't do, is because they're more vulnerable. They're the ones that are most likely to go to try to leave their lane, so to speak, for whatever reason.
Also, taking it back to that original sin, perhaps there's a lot of instruction for women because of the amount of influence they have over their husbands. They could push a path.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that a lot of one thing that I've been looking at this issue now for almost 3 years. Because when I first stumbled across modern feminism, it really just fascinated me. You go back to our inaugural show. It's on Podbean. We'll have to get that up on YouTube eventually.
Yeah.
But I just when I kind of woke up again in 2016, it was just like I was just like, what is this feminist nonsense? This is so laughably funny. Do people actually take this seriously? And unfortunately, yes. But it's really, yeah, women are told that the way to be powerful is to act like men. Their real power comes from being women.
Right.
They have more power over men as just being a woman, and as Proverbs would say, of noble character, taking care of their husband, managing a good house, having children. They have all the power. Men might have the authority, but women have the power.
Right.
Or no, I said that wrong. Women have the influence. Men have the power. That's a better way to put it, because it's a confusion of the dynamic between influence and power.
Mm-hmm.
Women have the influence, men have the power. And it's...
But you can't, but you're not, when you look at a modern feminist female,
mm-hmm.
they don't have that traditional influence. Because when you look at them, it's very hard to respect anything that they say or do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the trick, right? They're told that they're getting power, but at the end of the day, they neither have influence nor power.
It's more like I feel pity because they've lost what makes them special.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the part of the big trick is that they're trading what makes them special for being an inferior version. They're basically trading being women for being inferior men.
Yeah, it's everything. It's everything that's influenced by Satan. It's everything that's backwards.
Mm-hmm. Essentially. Anyways, so I mean that's a little bit of a downer to end it on. I don't really want to end it there. There's another Instagram.
Sure.
And okay, so we're talking here, just kind of wrapping up, some solutions. We've kind of talked a little bit about, for any women that are listening, or for any men listening to this, any women listening to this, if you're a man listening to this, try to read up in those portions of the Bible that speak to how women are to conduct themselves, the things that God gives women to do and gives them free rein in. And encourage your wives or your girlfriends in that. Any women listening to this, I encourage you to read those things and try to do them. That's where you're going to get your sense of fulfillment. That's where you're going to find that you really have power and where you're really going to have a meaningful life.
That sense of fulfillment and accomplishment.
Exactly. And as for solutions for how to combat this, let's see here. I'm gonna. There's a great Christian comic drawer guy that. He no longer does comics online, which is kind of sad, but Adam 4D, Adam the number 4, the letter D.com. His name is Adam Ford. So Adam 4D. Let's see here. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, there's one that's called Keep Resisting. Look up, do a search. It's Adam40/keep-resisting / and I'll just read it. John, if you want to pull, have you got it pulled up?
I'm pulling up we're on the site. We're just pulling up.
Here, I'm gonna shoot you the link real quick. You can just pop it up.
Perfect.
There it is. So I'm just gonna read this, and this was, I forget when this was posted. Let me see here. I don't know when it was posted. It's been some time now, but it's titled "Keep Resisting." Keep resisting by staying married. being faithful to your spouse, going to church on Sundays, raising boys to be men and girls to be women, thanking God for all your blessings. Things such as these used to be considered basic standards of decency, not anymore. Do you know what they are now? Small revolutionary acts of defiance against our society's present experiment in sexual revolution, subjectivity worship, tolerance, and hatred toward anything that is God-honoring. For the glory of God and the good of man, keep resisting. And honestly, that's just the way to fight it. To fight against this is don't bow to the culture. Men and women are different. We have different God-given roles. It's not what the culture says is important, but it's what God says is important. And at the end of the day, the proper relationship between men and women models the gospel.
Nice.
And as even more so than that, the God-honoring relationship between men and women builds society. It builds civilization.
It built ours.
Exactly.
And the only way that we're going to get to keep it is to continue it.
Pretty much. I mean, I know that what was it, Owen Benjamin? He says like the best thing that you can do is just to have kids. Just raise kids.
Yep.
Have a family. Grow your own food. Basic stuff.
Yeah, the basic stuff is the stuff that they're trying to destroy.
Yeah.
So keep it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's all I'd say.
Absolutely.
I wanted to so we had that Made by Jim Bob meme about Lena Dunham.
Yep.
Why don't you pull up the second Made by Jim Bob? You haven't seen this. Have you seen it? Did you watch this one?
I did not.
Oh, okay. So we'll get an honest reaction from you from this one. It's really Nah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I'm gonna unmute it.
All right. So
All right, I'm gonna do a 3, 2, 1 so that we can play it
Yep,
at the
go
same
ahead.
time. So we're gonna go
All right.
3, 2, 1, play.
We have a problem. They has a problem.
Sir has a problem.
A problem?
A problem.
A problem with hate speech.
This book?
This book is not art.
Not art.
It's propaganda.
Propaganda.
Hateful propaganda.
But what about free speech?
Hate speech is not free speech. These images violate community guidelines.
These doodles deny my existence.
Deny my existence. A threat to my well-being.
A threat to
That's
democracy.
Yeah, John.
It's time we silence hate.
Because silence is consent.
But also, silence hate.
Stop hate speech.
We don't know what it is.
But we know it when we see it.
All right, that's the end.
We
of it.
have a
Pause
problem.
It
Oh
it
my
just
gosh.
loops if you don't pause
Yeah.
it. But so, you know, I mean, I think that's complete satire. But that's what women getting the vote does.
Oh my god.
And
Oh,
If I'm-
wish that
if-
I picked
if
a
I-
different set of frames for my glasses. That's terrible.
oh god. But if I may be so bold, as to say this, I think that while that video is satire, it does show why women should never have a pair of shoes, because if they have a pair of shoes, that means they can go outside, and that's just not good for things. And John knows I'm joking. I hope you all know I'm joking too. Seriously though, I only let my wife have a pair of sandals. There's no ankle support, so she can't do an honest day's work. And anyways,
I assume she's not a watcher of the show.
oh, if she did, she'd laugh at that.
I know she would. She's great.
She loves her she loves her sandals. And we actually do joke about our relationship is very good because we actually joke about if she steps on line, I say, that's it. I'm pulling your shoe privileges. And then we laugh and everything's good.
That's awesome.
So, anyways, well, you know what? That's about it. That's about all we got.
I just want to say thank you to anybody that has watched or is watching or has enjoyed any of our programs. I hope that you guys learned something, and I hope that you come back again.
Amen. All right, take it easy, everybody. We'll see you next time.